a son, I'll teach him to be brave. 'Cause if I have a son, he's never really safe. And when you run to the corner store for a snack, I wanna know that you'll make it back home. Oh, your skin, it glitters like gold. There's love inside of your soul. But no matter what you say, no matter what you do, this world will never be as friendly to you. I wanna keep you close, I wanna keep you safe. I hope I see the day where I don't have to pray every time you go. And every time you go. If I have a girl, I'll teach her to be strong. 'Cause even when you're right, they'll tell you that you're wrong. And if you want something, you'll work twice as hard. 'Cause that's the only way we get far, far. Your skin, it glitters like gold. There's love inside of your soul. But no matter what you say, no matter what you do, this world will never be as friendly to you. I wanna keep you close, I wanna keep you safe. I hope I see the day where I don't have to pray every time you go. Every time you go. I saw a man lose his life, all 'cause his skin looked like mine. I hope the world makes a change, so when you get here it's not the same. Your skin, it glitters like gold. There's love inside your soul. But no matter what you say, no matter what you do, this world will never be as friendly to you. I wanna keep you close, I wanna keep you safe. I hope I see the day where I don't have to pray every time you go. Ooh, every time you go. If I have a son, I'll teach him to be brave. 'Cause if I have a son, he's never really safe.
Good evening again, everyone. Thank you all for joining us on this Friday evening. I'm so grateful to have you. I'm County Councilwoman Monique Anderson Walker, and I know that we are in for a very inspiring and empowering evening. I've often said that our youth are the leaders of our future. I'm sorry, I have never said that. I say, when people say that youth are the leaders of our future, that they're lying, that there are leaders now, and that every movement, every cultural change that's ever occurred in this nation and in the world has started with our youth. So you are truly our leaders now. This opportunity tonight is really just to give you a platform to do what you've been doing, and that's leading. We want to hear from you so that we know what steps we need to take to continue to move this country forward in a positive direction. And you all have the answers, we know that. Tonight, we're going to be blessed with the brilliance of many of our Maryland youth leaders from the region, Prince George's County and Arundel County, Howard, and Montgomery County as well. Very, very excited. This is our third installment in our Moving Forward series. Our very first one was on mental health, which we believe is a constant and something that we need to continue to address at all times. The second was a state of humanity, equity, specifically in America. And this one tonight is our Youth Summit, our leaders for eradicating injustices. We look forward to finding racial equity, and we know that you all do have the answers to it. So thank you again for that. I'm very proud that, that we have joining us a wonderful group of people. I do want to point out that over my shoulder, you see a bridge scene, and you see people walking over the bridge. And if you don't see it, you will see it in my background. But this is a photo that was taken a month or so ago during one of the Black Lives Matter marches that was designed by Black Girls for Black Lives. And we're very excited to have this as our background because it is an inspiration. And we want to continue this feeling of moving and moving forward. So thank you. Thank you again. I want to thank each of you who's with us this evening. Extremely honored again to have you. And without further ado, I will now turn the event over to our phenomenal moderator, Marissa Miles. Marissa truly represented at our State of Humanity Summit. She's a graduate of Oxon Hill High School, and she will soon be a freshman in college. Very excited for her at the University of Illinois. She started her own nonprofit, Resistance Research Coalition, and she's going to continue to do wonderful things. Thank you, Marissa, for your example and moderating this evening. Now I'm going to sit back and enjoy this evening. Let's move it forward.
Thank you, Councilwoman Walker. The first time I had actually met her was when she was campaigning, and it was a youth event. So I know her past has always involved the youth, and I know moving forward, got it, that the youth will be involved in as well. So as this newest addition to moving forward, this is the Youth Summit. So I have the honor and opportunity to moderate this panel, but it's really about the other young people. They have done leaps and bounds above their peers, above even some adults in terms of advocacy and what they have done, some of them before the age of 18. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce our lovely panelists. So the first one is Olivia Gray.
Hi, I'm Olivia Gray. I am a rising junior at Salisbury University, and I am a co-founder of Black Girls for Black Lives. I serve as our PR officer.
Next is Chelsea Okoro.
Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea Okoro. I attend Bowie State University, where I serve as a senior class vice president, and I am one of the co-founders of Black Girls for Black Lives, and I serve as the advocacy chair.
Nick Asante.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Asante, and I'm a rising senior at Richard Montgomery High School. I'm currently serving as the 43rd student member of the Montgomery County Board of Education, and I've decided to focus a lot of my term on COVID-19 recovery and expanding equitable opportunities for all students across my county.
Zach Kong.
Hi, I'm Zach Hong. My pronouns are he, him. I am the student member of the Board of Education for Howard County, and like Nick, I focus extremely heavily on equity.
Janine Walker.
Hi, my name is Janine Walker. I am a rising junior at North Carolina A&T State University, where I am a member of the Political Action Committee and Speech and Debate team. And with that being said, all views that I express are my own and not reflective of that of the SGA or Political Action Committee.
Isaac Allen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Isaac Allen. I'm a junior at Residence High School in Harris County, Maryland. I also serve as the Maryland State National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, Youth and College Division President, and I usually focus my work around education.
Aurora McKenzie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Aurora McKenzie. I'm a senior at Cornell University. I'm a co-founder for Black Girls for Black Lives, and I serve as our secretary.
Maya Pierce.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maya Pierce. I am a rising junior at Clark Atlanta University. I am also a co-founder of Black Girls for Black Lives, and I serve as the second vice president.
Kendall McDonald.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kendall McDonald. I am a junior at Spelman College. I'm also a co-founder of Black Girls for Black Lives, and I serve as one of the co-communications chairs.
And last, but certainly not least, Nina Jackson.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Nina Jackson, and I'm a rising senior at Oxon Hill High School, so a part of the class of 2021. I'm a longtime community advocate here in Prince George's County, but I now have the honor and the privilege of serving as the 41st student member of the Board of Education.
So as you heard, great group of young people from all different types of backgrounds, different schools. Oh, and I forgot one person. He actually comes from my high school, Christian Hayes. And also I forgot Drake Smith. My apologies. So Christian, could you do yours first?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christian Hayes. I attend Oxon Hill High School, and I am a rising senior.
Drake Smith.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Drake Smith. I'm a rising senior at Meade High School. I'm the student member of the Board of Education for Anne Arundel County. And previous to that, I was the president of the Anne Arundel County NAACP Youth and College Division.
Now there are all the panelists. My apologies. So we are going to be covering a wide array of topics today, but they all affect the youth in similar but different ways. From police reform to, of course, education, to housing, the environment. These are all things that youth are leading the charge and making a difference in our day-to-day lives. So this wouldn't be a youth panel if we didn't start with education. So all of these students are in high school and college, and their experiences have been different on each and every level. So I have a few questions that have been cultivated from the audience, from different people within the community to start us off. So first question for the education is, the Prince George's County Board of Education is composed of both appointed and elected board members, commonly known as a hybrid model. Are you in favor or against this composition? Do you support a fully elected Board of Education? And no one person has to rush through it, and not everybody has to respond, but if that question speaks to you, I hope that this question speaks to you. So.
Oh, so I guess I'll answer first. I am definitely in support of an all-elected school board. One of the things that we're commonly taught when we're learning about governance and in politics is the importance of the ballot box and the importance of voting. And I believe the reason why we should all be in favor of a fully elected school board is because the ballot box is one of our strongest means in ways of holding our public officials accountable, right? When you cast your vote for a public official and they get elected, they received their mandate to serve from their constituents and from those who voted for them. But if you're an elected official and you're appointed by another government official or by another public servant, well, you're no longer directly accountable to your voters or to your constituents because you don't have any voters. So yes, I am in favor of a fully elected Board of Education.
I completely agree with Nina. In Anne Arundel County, right now, we're in the transition from a hybrid board to a fully elected board. And so, the people of our county have already spoken. We're going to get a fully elected board. But everything Nina said is true. But what a fully elected board also does, it brings the school system closer to the parents. When you vote for someone on the board, you know what they're going to do for you. And let's say you just have someone that's appointed by a commission, and that's what we have in Anne Arundel County, a school board appointment commission. Then you're not as involved in what they're going to do for you. So, elected boards just mean it brings the board member and the parents closer together.
I'd like to bounce off Drake's point. In Montgomery County, we have a fully elected Board of Education. And on our Board of Education, all of our adult members are either past teachers or parents or principals, people who have worked in education, who have experienced it firsthand, so they know what's actually going on in the classroom. Whereas if you have an appointed board members, you may have people who are essentially career politicians who may be somewhat disconnected from the classroom. So by having a board that's completely elected, you know that not only are these people connected to their constituents, but they genuinely care about what their constituents have to say and things that their constituents want to get done. I know whenever we're deciding policies, the biggest factor is what are the people in our email inboxes, or what are the different things that people are telling us, what do they want and how can we implement that?
Now, as Nina brought up in the first part, voting, our vote is our power. And speaking of votes, a lot of politicians had voted in favor of Blueprint for Maryland's Future that has been vetoed by Governor Hogan. And I wanted to ask the students, do you agree or disagree with, the veto from Governor Hogan and COVID's on the mind, Governor Hogan, and what would the Blueprint for Maryland's Future possibly do in your schools?
Okay. So it's actually really funny. So prior to COVID and the school shutdowns, I had the opportunity to personally go up to Annapolis with a host of students from my school and students from across the county here in Prince George's County. And we each were able to, as a group collectively, to deliver a presentation on different facets of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future and how that would impact our county. My group specifically, we had universal pre-K. But I say this to say that Blueprint for Maryland's Future undoubtedly would be a monumental and historic legislation in regards to how it changes the quality of public education for our state. It would ensure not only the adequate funding of our schools, which I could go on forever about that, but also making sure that we have policy recommendations in place to ensure that our school districts are providing quality and equitable public education. And so in regards to Prince George's County specifically, well, there's a few things that this would have done for us, right? One of the parts of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future is providing things called poverty grants. It would have provided additional money to schools who have a high concentration, I think it was 60 or 80% of farm students that attend their institutions. And if you don't know, farm is used as a measurement of sorts of the measure of poverty or low income students and families that attend an institution. It also would have provided money for additional mental health services and additional mental health coordinators. And it also would have helped with funding for a initiative in Prince George's County and in other parts of the state called community schools. We have 40 plus community schools here in Prince George's County, all that are fully equipped with wraparound services and other resources provided by nonprofit and private businesses and organizations that the Blueprint for Maryland's Future would have helped to fully fund and ensure that we can, make sure we have the best resources in place for our students. So it's unfortunate that Governor Hogan saw fit to veto the legislation, and I hope that moving forward, we can find a way to get it fully funded and fully passed.
Okay, if there is no other people who want to respond, I have a little bit of a fun question. I want people to get a little bit creative, okay? So if you had $1 billion drop from the sky, just happened Wednesday, and you could put it into your school district's budget, how would you like to see that money used to help the students?
So for me, if I had $1 billion, first, I would just give the teachers like a flat raise, a salary raise. Right now our teachers are overworked and underpaid. We've seen this with the COVID. They're going above and beyond to serve the students in ways, really unimaginable. So, we've been needing to do this for years, and $1 billion, like $1 billion, that would really help it out. Then with the remainder of the money, first, I would add more money into technology resources, because once again with COVID, we've seen how beneficial technology is, and just the divide and the opportunity gap due to a lack of technology. And then lastly, I guess I would just add more money in the Title I schools so that most impoverished students can have the same opportunities as the other students.
I fully agree with everything Drake just mentioned, and then some additional things I would do. One thing I really wanted to push for during my term, although I think COVID may have come in the way of that, is getting feminine hygiene products that are available to all of our female students who need that, because that's not a resource that's easily accessible for all students. But if schools were to provide that, I feel like that would help a lot of people. And then also sort of establishing a sort of work study program where students can get paid to do different work for our school board, because I know right now money is very tight for a lot of families, and if our school board is giving students those opportunities to work and to gain money, that would help out a lot of families.
I completely agree with everything that's been stated, and I see in the comments the free and reduced lunch. I agree with that too. I also want to add more counselors for mental health. There are a lot of students who suffer from mental health and don't have anybody to talk to or anybody who is trained to talk to. I know personally that in other schools, it's a lot of white counselors, and that's fine because they can relate to certain stuff, but I would like to see more counselors of color who can kind of relate to more issues that those who aren't of color can't relate to.
Now, before I move on to the next topic, this one's kind of like a middle ground. So the question is, do you believe police officers or SROs, school resource officers, should be in schools?
Well, I guess I can go ahead, Drake.
No, Nick, you can go ahead. You started first.
I was just gonna say, I think the role of a school resource officer, I think, should be less about arresting students, less about policing students, and more about being that guiding person for students within the school building. I know that the issue is something that various people have different opinions on. I've heard from students in high impoverished areas that their SROs are a great member of their community and that they relate well to their students. While I've also heard from other students that their SRO over polices their school and targets minority groups. So I think we really need to work on taking away the arresting power and the policing power from SROs, but keeping them in our schools as a figure that some students can relate to and go to, and making sure they're also trained in other things like being able to help students deal with problems relating to things like mental health.
I 100% agree with Nick. You know, it's not about if we have police officers in our schools, it's if those police officers in our schools are properly trained. You know, we can have, multiple police officers and good and bad and ugly, but if they're trained a proper way how to deal with students who are having a bad day, because students have a bad day for all kinds of reasons, and they shouldn't just end up in handcuffs at the end of the day just for some outburst. So we just want to make sure our police officers are properly trained so they can do their job and do it well.
Well, if that's all for that question, that beautifully moves us on to our next session, which is police reform. So the first question in police reform is, recently the Prince George's County Executive announced the formation of a task force to study and make recommendations on police reform. If you served on that committee and could make one recommendation, what would that be?
I would recommend that Prince George's County lobby our state legislature and get them to repeal the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights.
I would recommend that the county implement a civilian review board where with subpoena power. So if you have a altercation with the police and you want to fill out a negative personnel report, that this civilian review board would independently review it, and then they would handle the case and hand down a verdict, so it would be impartial.
Hi, everyone. My suggestion or my recommendation would be more so to change the system, to change the foundation in which the police department was built on. You know, I feel as though since the root of the police department came from, I don't want to say evil, but evil. It started with, you know, we all know where the police department came from. It was to catch slaves. So for you to continue off of that, it's already on for people of color, a broken foundation. You know, it's not broken to them because that's what they made it for, but it's on a broken foundation already. So even if you make little changes, at the end of the day, it may help, but it won't help as much as actually laying down a solid, fresh foundation. You know, you can't build a house without a good foundation, or the house is bound to fall. And we're now seeing that in America, that the house is tipping over. So I'll definitely recommend that we need a new foundation. We need a new system. Thank you.
As our previous panelists talked about the broken foundation that our police system is put on, I want to ask the panelists, do you think that the police can truly be reformed then?
I think that police can truly be reformed. I know currently in Montgomery County, our county council is working to sort of redefine what the role of police officers are and making sure that they're only responding to situations that they're properly trained for. For instance, I know that when people may see someone who's homeless sleeping at a bus stop, the first instinct is to call a police officer, which doesn't make sense because the police officer is not helping anyone in that situation. So I know our county council is working on ensuring that when you call 911 and you describe your situation, it'll dispatch a specific group, a mobile focus group that is trained on that scenario rather than calling the police, and will get you right there. So I think by minimizing the role of police and ensuring that they're only there for true emergencies, then you can work on police reform.
So, in my opinion, I don't think that the police can truly be reformed. I think that needs to start from the ground up again, in a way. And I understand that the police have roles in our communities that, you know, they're necessary in some ways, whether that's investigating things in the community or helping out or using tools that they have for certain things. In certain cases, they're needed. There's people who are trained to do that. But the problem is that we're seeing police officers are disregarding their training to actually protect and serve and using it and abusing their power. We look at Portland, Oregon, and even though that's on the other side of the country, there are multiple videos across social media where we're seeing police officers abuse the power that they are given, whether that's through their being able to do internal investigations, whether that's using the tools they have, the weapons that they have, blatantly macing peaceful protesters because they feel as though they said something they didn't like. That for me, it can't be reformed. That for me is everybody needs to, that's been doing that and disrupting the cycle of protecting and serving and using it for their own advantages, for their own goals and for their own personal reasons. Those people do need to be fired, convicted, and charged as anybody should be, because if we're going to think about the police, we do need a system that does help the communities that we live in, that we dwell in, that we're not terrified or scared of the people that are meant to serve us and meant to act as public servants for our protection. So what I think is that it needs to come from the ground up, and maybe that does start with truly abolishing the police.
So as she ended with abolish the police, the common phrase during the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, whatever name you want to give it, protest has been defund the police. And there has been media spreads everywhere about what that means. And in different contexts, and to certain people, it means different things. So I just want to wrap up the police reform panel section with, what does defund the police mean to you?
Well, I think defund the police, look at defund the police, the sentence itself. If you change the sentence to this, refund the community, that's all it is. Defunding the police, taking money away from the police departments where they can buy, tanks, military style weapons, military style, all kinds of things, and you just put it to stuff that we really need, like more mental health resources, put it back into education. So then you won't have all these violent offenders or repeat offenders, because the more you put into something, the better it's going to be. So the more money we put in these impoverished areas, you know, we're going to see a turnaround.
Yeah, I want to echo everything Drake just said about defunding the police. Defunding the police is the whole fundamental idea is to invest in our communities so that we won't need the police in the first place, right? So why is it that 40 million Americans don't have health care? Why is it that education in this country is inadequate? You know, we need to fund the root problems so then this band-aid of policing won't be necessary. So defunding the police is a systematic change that will benefit everyone in our society.
Go ahead, sorry.
Okay, I agree to a point about what both of you all have said. I just want to touch on the statement where you said, Drake, I believe you said that the more money that you put into something, the better it'll be. I agree, but I would just like us to clarify, we're talking about our community, because the police has a lot of money and they do have a lot of funds and they're not good. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I do think that defund means to defund. I know a lot of people have used it for it to mean abolish, and it can mean different things to different people. But to me personally, whenever I hear the word defund the police, it means taking the money away from the police department, from the administrative police officers, because they have too much money. They should not have enough funds to purchase riot gear to use on their neighbors. They should not have the money to use tear gas to blind somebody. I wear contacts. If I get tear gas, I'm going to be blind for the rest of my life. So that money can be directed towards the schools, towards the community who don't have enough money as it is right now, and who don't have any funds to keep the community thriving. So that's what I think defund should mean and what it needs to mean.
Just to off of that, why is it that healthcare workers don't have masks? And we have the biggest pandemic the world's ever seen. Healthcare workers don't have masks, don't have adequate personal protective equipment, and yet our police have full riot gear, militarized armored vehicles, and rubber bullets to shoot at peaceful protesters. Why is that? Because I think it highlights a fundamental community problem about funding.
I'd like to echo and agree with a lot of the sentiments that have been expressed. And I think to Drake's point about putting more money into things to make them better, I think that actually stands true with the police. The police were built on a system of oppression and racism. And I think because we've given them so much money, they've been really good at oppressing and being racist. And I think that's the problem. And I think the focus has been on, a lot of people have felt outrage when they hear defund the police with reducing the police force, but I don't think that's where the focus should be. You should be focusing on the fact that we're taking that money and giving it back into the community, like everyone else has said, and that is what you should be focusing on, and that should make you happy, because the police, in my opinion, is an oppressive force that needs to be reduced.
Just to follow up and piggyback off of what everyone said, I also believe that the funding of the police, it gives them way too much power. And that power can be taken away when you reinvest into the community. So when you find different ways to take that power away, so they'll call the police on someone suffering from mental health, rather than paying someone who is trained and goes to school for years that has the training to help that person. They call the police, and then later escalates and it becomes police brutality, because they don't know how to deal with someone with a disorder, or they don't know how to deal with people who are going through stuff. So definitely reinvesting into different fields and just distributing the money appropriately. There's no reason why Hogan is taking money away from the school system, but giving the police more money. Our youth need the money. We need more resources in the school. The school's already deprived. I don't know if you know, but Baltimore City, I know like either last year or 2 years ago, I don't know if it was heat or AC, but they didn't have it. And students were literally suffering in the schools. So it's like, why are you taking money away rather than finding solutions to problems that are already in that system?
Yeah, I just want to say, I agree with what everyone is saying. I think the term defund the police, like everyone is saying, gets misconstrued. A lot of people change the meaning and really defund the police. People don't really understand how much money the police really have. There's a lot of money that we don't even see that goes to the police system. And a lot of people don't research where the money is getting put, and they don't know how many other systems that don't have money, like what's been said, the school systems. So I think that a lot of people need to be educated on where money is being distributed in our community. And a lot of people don't understand exactly how much money is being distributed into the police system. So we need to spread that word when we talk about defunding the police.
In my opinion, I think that defunding the police, as everyone has said, means reallocating the money towards something else, redistributing back into the community. The biggest thing with defunding the police for me, I think one of the main things should be transparency of budget. When you vote, you should be able to see what people are thinking in terms of reallocating that money. So if that's, having a set budget as to where that money is going, do people think it's going to go straight into community rec centers, to schools, to sports programs, to recreational activities, etc. I think that transparency is a big thing, because as people said, we don't know where that money's going, yet they have so much. I've learned that the police funding is top down, so we pay a lot in administration fees through our taxes, but it doesn't really get down to the point where it's helping still protect and serve us. It's more about paying the people who are working in the cubed office spaces. And that for me is something that doesn't make sense, because we still have teachers who on their school supply list in elementary and middle schools are saying, okay, students, can you also bring in tissue paper? Can you also bring in highlighters, bring in these things for us to use as a classroom? And having basically defunded education, in my opinion, education is an equalizer. So if you're already putting less money into educating students and educating people in general, and especially public schools, then you're not doing the job. And this is me basically coming for Larry Hogan, but still, it does not make sense as to why we don't have the transparency of knowing the correct information to even make an exact decision about what needs to be defunded and where it needs to go.
Beautifully said. On that note, I'm going to move to the next section of our program, and that is a spoken word by Chelsea Okoro.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Chelsea Okoro, and I'll be performing an original spoken word called Black in America. And when you're listening to this, I want you to, think of experience, think of what's going on in America. Close your eyes if you need to. But I just want to come here and tell you what it's like to be Black in America, the home of where they brought my ancestors and made them the enslaved, lynched, beat, and killed us if we didn't behave. Put their grandchildren in a school system that serves to whitewash their history with the sole purpose of making their real heritage a mystery. Strip us from our background of royalty and excellence, hide the evidence, keep us out of our true element. Let me tell you what it's like to be Black in America. When I pass any cop car, I look over my shoulder to make sure I'm not about to get pulled over. The land where those that swore to serve and protect us are now the ones we need protection from. Welcome to America. I refuse to say land of the free, more like land of the thieves. As if it wasn't enough in the 1800s, they tried to continue with me. If I sat and gave you the statistics, it would be numbers you wouldn't even believe. And they tried to call America home of the free. If it's not lift every voice and sing, don't even try it with me. Let me tell you what it's like to be Black in America, where the system you're put into is meant to destroy you from birth, where my people rise no matter the obstacle because we were destined on earth, where the cops are raided, where the education system is defunded so the cops could get a better car, where the cops raided Breonna Taylor's house, killed her, and still were never charged, where George Floyd was on the ground for 8 minutes, 46 seconds calling for his mom, where Trayvon Martin's killer went free and made thousands off that gun, where Archie Elliott was killed, handcuffed in the back of a cop car. Let me tell you what it's like to be Black in America, home of the. Thank you.
That was awesome. Powerful.
I think we all felt that. sorry, got to collect myself. But as she said, being Black in America started with my ancestors, many Black Americans' ancestors, but we have to recognize that they were human capital. We were a currency, we were cattle, we were something to be traded, we were a good. And we are the fundamental, my people are the fundamental layer of economics in this country. So that's how I want to segue into our next session. So the next section is economics. So we have some great panelists in this section. And I want to start the first question off with the looming recession approaching, do you feel like capitalism is still the best system for American economics?
So as an econ major, I could say that having to actually thoroughly study this, capitalism is only a system that benefits a small number of people. So it's the people that are at the top that benefit. And over time, it just, let's say you have a house built on sand and eventually the sand is eroding away at that pillar that the house is on. That's where everyone else is. So you might think that you're safe because, oh, I'm up here, I'm in middle class, I'm upper middle class. But as the system continues over time, if you're not at the top, if you're not in that house that has all the safe guards on it, you really are ultimately just being exploited. So at this point, it makes the most sense just to alleviate so many issues that we're having as a society throughout this country to start moving to a more socialized economic model. So that means, so for some people, you know, that looks like, let's make college universities free. Let's let's subsidize the production of necessary goods, like, let's say like prescription medicine and all of that. Subsidize the cost of production so that way it's cheaper and everyone can get to it. But I think especially there's one thing COVID has shown us, is that this system that we currently are operating under is weak. And if it takes something like this to make it fall apart that quickly, then it's a sign that we definitely need to make a change, and we need to make that change quickly.
I just want to piggyback off what she said. I definitely agree. And also just to touch up on and kind of give examples, like even if you really take your time and realize that the top does, they basically, they're who benefits from the capitalist society. Like even prisons, they benefit because they're privately owned, prisons are privately owned, and they outsource the incarcerated to do work for other privately owned companies and businesses. So these companies are making money, and we'll get into the 13th Amendment another day, but making money off of the people that are incarcerated. And the reason the capitalist society, it really benefits the wealthy already. Like even for when COVID-19 first took place, I'm pretty sure many of us saw what happened, where we've seen all these people who already are wealthy, they made even more money, while we saw a lot of people lose their jobs. A lot of people couldn't provide, couldn't pay rent, couldn't do anything, because the capitalist society is meant to benefit the wealthy, not the middle class, not the lower class. So I definitely don't think a capitalist society is what is needed in America.
I agree. And I think going back to the question where you asked if capitalism was still the best option for America, I don't think it was the best option for America to begin with. I think capitalism was built strategically to oppress and to keep certain groups of people down. And like the other panelists have mentioned, we've seen the same groups of people rise to the top as others are not able to climb up. Capitalism creates an inescapable cycle of poverty that disproportionately impacts our minority communities. And I think it's time that America starts to move away from capitalism. This pandemic has only exacerbated a lot of those gaps. And as we see the middle class collapsing while our upper class rising, I think capitalism is just like not the best option for us.
And I'd also like to add, this was touched on by Chelsea, but capitalism as an economic system leads to, the mentality of capitalism leads into other institutions that we have. So if you're looking at over policing, right? You know, a lot of these police officers are on productivity quotas. So they need to pull over X amount of people during X amount of time. They need to write X amount of tickets. They need to be performing to show that they deserve to either advance or to just maintain their jobs in general. So I feel like we can't just look at capitalism as just like markets and spending and companies. We need to look at how the mentality of capitalism has negatively or positively, if you want to look at it that way, impacted our society as a whole, and whether or not the ramifications of its influence are actually worth it.
Beautifully said. I want to close off the economic section with this last question. Now, I know not every panelist is from Prince George's County, but with you guys' proximity, Prince George's County is, you know, touted as one of the most affluent African-American communities in the nation. And what does that mean to you as some people a resident and some people witnessing what some may call Black excellence in oftentimes a capitalistic way?
I'll start. Oh, I didn't know if Nick wanted to start, but I'll start. I am a resident of Prince George's County, native, been here 21 years of my life. So, and honestly, being from Prince George's County and it being one of the most affluent African-American counties in the nation is actually very, I'll say inspiring and encouraging, just growing up around Black wealth, around Black successful people. It's definitely, you know, because I'm Black. So it's like, you know, you want to see role models that you can actually look up to that look like you. You know, you don't want to look up to someone that you can't relate to. I know people who've been at the bottom and they've made it. And that's really inspiring, especially because, I mean, now I go to HBCU. So I went from only being around successful Black people in Prince George's County to Black people around the world. But I also definitely wanted to use it as a time to talk about how, of course, you know, we're one of the most affluent, wealthy counties in the nation, but then also you need to look at compared to every county in the nation, if that makes sense. You know, you don't only want to, of course, you know, it's something to celebrate as a Black community, but then it's also where do we stand combined to other communities and combined to the white communities. You know, you don't want to only be looking at it as, you know, because we are comparing Black counties in America.
Yeah, that also brings a good point, how like the different perspectives. Because as you said before, celebrating the fact that PG County, well, I'm a Howard County resident, but I do know that PG County is one of the most affluent Black communities in the country. However,
and we like to say Prince George's. Just have to throw that in there, Prince George.
Prince George's County is one of the most wealthy Black communities in the country. However, when it comes to the perspective, there's still different discrepancies in like resources are properly allocated to those counties. If it is the most affluent Black community, how come there's still discrepancies in like the educational standards and stuff like that? Because I know, but even with Howard County, it is a wealthy county, and since I guess it's probably discrepancies in how the resources are allocated to those Black communities, there's still ways to improve those situations.
Speaking as someone who lives outside of Prince George's County, I think Prince George's County deserves all the praise for being one of the most affluent Black counties within our country. However, I feel like there's still that stigma around it just because of the fact that it is a predominantly Black area. I know in other counties across Maryland, there's definitely that stigma with Prince George's County, and I don't think that should be the case. And I think this comes from, once again, that mentality of like that capitalist mentality where certain groups should be kept at the bottom while other groups should be kept at the top. And I think it gives me, in a way, sort of, it gives me the vibes of Tulsa, Oklahoma, you know, Black Wall Street. And I think there's definitely a fear from a racist group of people who don't like to see predominantly Black community succeed. And I think that can be said with Prince George's County, although, like I said, it deserves all the praise for being one of the most affluent Black counties in our country.
So as a lifelong resident of PG County, I have mixed feelings about this kind of praise for being a wealthy county.
Did you say PG or did you say Prince George's?
I said PG County.
Okay, excuse me, I'm gonna go back to mute.
But I have mixed feelings about this because it's like under capitalism in America, wealth has been almost equivalent to like whiteness or white adjacentness. So it's like they're taking this, oh, look at these Black people in this concentrated area. They're affluent, they got nice houses, etc. They're using that as a form of way to prove our worth. And that's where I start to feel pretty mixed about it because, you know, I'm happy to say my grandmother from New Orleans was able to advance through the Jim Crow South, get a degree in math, and work to move up here. My grandfather, who didn't have his father there, growing up in the projects and fairly poor, was able to come here and establish a family in a nice, and be one of the first Black families to kind of establish this young Black professional area. However, then that becomes divisive. It's just another layer of respectability politics in which Black people have to prove our worth and why we're worthy of praise. When we have systematically, historically, have always had to work, they like to say twice as hard, I would say like 10 times as hard to get maybe a quarter, an eighth if we're being realistic, of what white people in this country have. So I think it's nice we can acknowledge it. I'm not going to say disregard facts, but also we need to understand why is this such an important metric to us? And is it truly as important as we like to think that it is? Because once we start thinking about this in a different way, once we dismantle that way of thinking, we start to attack the real issues and not focus on the distractions that are put out there for us.
Yeah, also makes a point of how labeling PG County as like the wealthiest Black community in the county in the state of Maryland, in the country, kind of just like puts us in a different playing field, I guess, because like if we keep living ourselves into riches, putting a label as Black community, and not putting us putting to the perspective of community in general, it limits our potential. So.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with what Janine was saying. And I also feel as though like it's somewhat in a way I feel like sometimes when people say it, especially it's to show like, okay, no matter what obstacles are there, like it's possible. So basically not having to change the system because, you know, Prince George's County, they're a really wealthy county. So why do we need to change the system if people already, you know, they can make it to being wealthy or they can obtain wealth. So why do you have to change? Or why is there oppression if people can make it through it, if that makes sense? So I definitely think that I understand why it's important, but then it's also like, when you think of it on different playing fields and different mindsets towards it, yeah.
On that note, I want to start and close that economics section of our summit. But also I want to move on to the next section, which is environment, but still starting with an economic question. So is economic development worth sacrificing our natural resources?
No. I can go first.
All right, go ahead.
I don't think that sacrificing our natural resources is worth anything, especially in the communities that we're in. In most cases, what ends up happening is, especially in places that can be urban, suburban, or even rural, you will have people that will come in and buy up land for half of whatever they're going to actually make up off of it. A big problem, I think, within our country in general is a lot of Black farms being just bought out. Whenever we sacrifice our natural resources, and a lot of these places just end up being factory mills or car manufacturing businesses, then we're sacrificing, number one, we're sacrificing our economic power. And in addition, it's not going to help us too much whenever we get to places like this and we don't have enough natural resources, so we have to put more money in anyway to just sort of overlap whatever we've given away.
Yeah, I just want to agree with everything that he just said. And the answer is no. Nothing is worth exploiting our natural resources. We have one shot on this planet. And if we're gonna just screw it up for the rest of the generations, we might as well just stop now, right? So what else do we know about exploitation of resources? Where does that happen predominantly? In minority communities and in foreign countries, where we're going and spending year after year in foreign wars to steal oil and at the cost of human life. We must stand as humans together and protect our environment because we don't have a second choice. This is a very simple thing. There is nowhere else we can go. So we might as well protect what we have now while we still can.
And this ties into a multitude of things. So there's this concept of environmental racism, where if you're looking across the country, it's mostly Black and brown communities that are having to live basically with factories in their backyards, blowing all this exhaust and causing a lot of this developmental issues, particularly if you're looking at asthma and other respiratory issues. And I think it's definitely not worth that risk, especially if we don't live in a society with comprehensive common sense healthcare. So then we're putting the disadvantage at a further disadvantage, where then now we are having, we're seeing an increase in childhood cancer. Even if you live in that environment, you're more likely to develop cancer anyway, and not enough resources put there to make sure that they can even deal with the situation that they had no choice but to be put into. So it's not worth sacrificing our natural resources and putting the lives of our people at risk just for some economic gain that, if we're being real about it, Prince George's County is a majority Black county. Most of these businesses coming in are not Black owned. So then our money's not even circulating within us. It's just leaving immediately.
I agree with everything all the panelists said, but I also want to point out the fact, the mental health aspect. If you're just in a city, a concrete jungle, that's really going to negatively impact your mental health. So we want to make sure the environment is still there, just so, especially Black and brown people who tend to have higher rates of mental health problems and tend to not seek the help because it's stigmatized, that they can, so that they can find a way to, I guess, de-stress, walk in the park, maybe a nice walk on the beach, maybe even if you have a boat, go out on the water. But you can't do that if those environmentally things like parks or the bay, if it's all, destroyed and gone, because then what's the point?
Yeah. I think you kind of hit it right on the head. Whenever you want to talk about mental health, you want to talk about our natural resources. Our natural resources include things like just trees in general, just having grass. And if you're living in a concrete jungle and the nearest park to you is maybe 3 miles out, and 3 miles away, all it is just a circle, and the rest of it is surrounded by streets and buildings and things like that. Number one, you're going to be less likely to try to go outside and actually exercise. Number two, the breathing quality of that specific city in that low income area is more likely to go down.
Another question. So transportation is one of the biggest environmental factors, not only just car exhaust, but also the money and lobbying that billionaires put into to make sure that public transportation that often helps the environment doesn't come to fruition. So I want to know you guys' personal stances on public transportation, because as a Marylander, I can say our public transportation could definitely be better. It could definitely be more connected, especially from Southern Maryland up to Baltimore, and initiatives like the Red Line that was unfortunately vetoed by Governor Hogan, and things like that could be very beneficial and also bring a lot of economic prosperity, but also is a big help to the environment. So what are you guys' thoughts on public transportation? Should it be expanded? And what are some creative ways that you think public transportation could be expanded in the state of Maryland and beyond in many Black and Brown communities that sometimes the public transportation is a little iffy sometimes?
I think the one way, it's not really creative, just giving more money into the system, more bus stops, more bus routes, more bus drivers, more buses in general. And not just that, but like you said, the red line that was vetoed, more money in that type of transportation, trains and all this. So really just fund it more.
And I just to sort of go off what he said, whenever it comes to public transportation, that affects our overall environment, like how we're discussing if we want to talk about pollution. Obviously, having more public transportation that is convenient will allow more people, especially in low-income areas, to, instead of putting themselves in debt for a new car, can just take the bus back and forth, back and forth. And also, I think if we expand our public transportation, just like I think PG County and Maryland have been an example during this COVID-19 pandemic, that we can set the standard for other states and other communities. If our public transportation is expanded where it is convenient and it is no longer the new norm to buy a car and continue to drive around everywhere and commute outside of your city or community, then overall we're affecting many different places and we're affecting it for the greater good.
So I have one final question for the environment. Lead in homes used to be an environmental danger. Now water is impacting many lives. In Detroit and in stormwater issues in homes and businesses in Maryland. These problems are largely related to negligence in builders, environmental standards, and decisions of local politicians. What legislation can be passed to ensure citizens are protected?
I feel like we should not solely be relying on legislation to protect the citizens, because we've had legislation put in many areas that doesn't adequately protect the people. So we could put in legislation. I believe we do already have building codes. There are codes under which neighborhoods and houses must be built, and they have to comply within those codes. So if it's coming down to issues of negligence, then it's not enough to just make legislation and assume that that's just going to patch up everything, because legislation's already in place. At this point, if we continue to see this, I think it's up to our county and state governments to not allow certain people to build if we're continuing to see these issues. So we shouldn't allow, if we have one group who's been building all these neighborhoods and we're seeing the same issues with water supply, flooding, et cetera, out of what we're seeing is negligence, then hit them in their pockets. Don't let them build here, because this isn't just an opportunity for you to make money. These are people's lives. People need roofs over their heads. They need clean water. So it's not enough just to say legislation is going to do this. Just the closest thing I think we can get to at a policy level is having our governments not allow people to build.
I believe firmly that this sort of problem results because it's intentional. I can speak from experience because my parents, they formerly owned a home, and that home was pretty much run down. We had a problem with our pipes all the time. What it does overall is it makes people pour more and more and more money into that house or fixing that problem. So this is done intentionally to make sure that people that are economically oppressed are not able to actually use that spending power elsewhere. And in addition, all it does is make sure that that person is more likely to give up that home. They'll charge you maybe $200 on up just for maybe a community. Say it's a Black-owned community, apartment complexes, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't matter at that point because they'll charge you more than what they're willing to charge your competitors once they come in and enhance the overall area as they might see it.
Yeah, I'll say that one piece of legislation that I've reviewed that I think is adequate and at least moves the ball forward is the Green New Deal. We need to pass a Green New Deal federally so that everyone has equal access to health care, has a clean environment to grow up in, and so our kids have a place in this future.
So on that note, I'm going to close environment, and I'm super excited for the next section. It's not any questions I'm asking, but I'm excited for the discussion. So the next section is the power of our vote in the Census 2020. If you haven't heard about the census, I don't know how, because it's been everywhere. The Census 2020 is a big deal, helps us see who's in America, nice to know, the demographics, what the incomes are like, but it also helps with the funding of our schools and things like that. So the census is so important. So we have a few different panelists that are going to be just having a free-flowing conversation in this section. So panelists, let's get into it.
I'll go. So the census isn't something that we kind of like hear a lot about. I know when it came around for this time, I was kind of like, everybody's making a big deal out of this, and I'm not really too familiar with it. But it's extremely important, and that cannot be stressed enough. You're talking about how many legislators you have on the federal level, because your census counting impacts the number of representatives that you have. You're talking about how much funding is provided to certain services in your community. So roads, schools, social safety nets, so things like food stamps and other financial services, and even school lunch services as well. You're talking about just funding going to your community in general, and you're also talking about giving legislators and community builders the opportunity to foresee what planning needs to be done for certain institutions, right? So by knowing how many people are in your community, you can understand how you need to plan thoroughly for things like transportation, which we talked about earlier, things like housing, which I think we'll talk about later, education in your schools, and also your emergency response services. So if you haven't already, please make sure that you fill out your census counting. Make sure that your friends, your family members, your coworkers, your colleagues also fill it out, because it cannot be stressed enough how important it is that every individual who's capable gets counted, because that's money in our pockets and money for our community.
I also agree with a lot of things that were already said, but I also want to speak on the importance of voting itself. We know we have a really big election coming up. It's really, really important that everyone uses the right that people literally fought to have. I know a lot of people, me being in college and talking to a lot of my friends, a lot of people don't think it's important to vote. They think their vote doesn't matter, their vote doesn't count. And that's really not true. I know that there are a lot of ways that our votes try to be, people try to oppress our votes. And it's really not, I know a lot of people have told me, I'm not really political, so I'm not going to vote because I'm not political, but it's really not about that. You have to do your research. Even if politics is not your life, it's definitely really important for you to get out and understand who you're voting for. And a lot of people also, new voters don't understand that the presidential election is not the only election that matters. Really, the local elections affect you more than you think, and they directly impact your community. And then that makes me flow over to the census, which is also really important. A lot of people don't understand what the census is, and they don't understand what it's used for, but it is a way for us to gain power back in our communities, because if we can't count how many people are in our communities, how does the government know where to allocate these trillions of dollars that they have to allocate to these different communities? And a lot of people also think that the census is a way to track your information and to for the government to just be nosy, but really it's actually illegal for the census to use your personal information. A lot of people are wary of that, so I want to let everybody know that that should not be a concern. You definitely should fill out the census to make sure that your communities can be funded and you can see changes in your community. So with that, yes, vote and participate in the census.
I think those are wonderful points. To the census only takes 5 minutes to do. You can do it during a commercial break of your favorite TV show, or you can do it when you're not doing anything, because that's what a lot of people tend to do in this, quarantine, this coronavirus situation. Have a lot more free time and use it productively. Now, to voting, if you don't vote, everything we're doing right now is a waste of time. The protesting, the riots, it's all a waste of time if you don't vote. Dr. King said the riots is the language of the unheard. Then that must mean voting is the language of the heard. We just need to make sure we vote. We need to put people in office that are going to really make the change. They're going to fund education. They're going to defund the police. They're going to refund the community. People that we want, us. Voting puts people like me and you in office, and people like me and you make the most change for our country. And just like Maya said, at all levels, not just the presidential election, the judges, the school board, your state and local officials, make sure you vote because our lives depend on it.
Yeah, and
go ahead, Zach.
I know I just saw something in the chat about families who are undocumented and might be scared to fill out the census. Well, it's federal law, as previously mentioned, that the Census Bureau is not allowed to use your personal information. That includes your legal status and your immigration status. So please fill out the census. It is so important so that we have the numbers and the statistics so we can divert the money where it needs to go. And on the process of voting, I know I'm under 16 or under 18. I can't vote in this election. I'm a 16-year-old, but that doesn't mean you can't make a difference. Make your parents fill out the census. I know I helped my parents all the way through it. Find the candidates in your district. I know we talked about police reform, but we need to elect district attorneys who are not buddies with the police departments. And that is, local elections are so important. So find the candidates and elected officials who support your values. Then help them. Send a message, tell your friends, post on social media. You can still make a difference in this election, even if you can't vote.
To add on to that, I think we all here wholeheartedly agree that voting is important, but I do want to acknowledge some of the concerns that come with voting. A lot of people may not feel comfortable with the options that we have available, right? A lot of people may be a little upset at the fact that we have a two-party system here in the United States. You got two choices for the most part. And what I want to say to that, especially in light of everything we've had going on for the past couple months, is that our electoral power can only take us so far, right? Because the fact of the matter is that system's kind of rigged. It takes a culmination of not only voting, because you do have to instill policymakers and legislators and executives who are going to make that tangible change, but also you need your, what I like to call, agitators. You need your artists, your musicians, your journalists, your activists. It takes a combination of your actors within the system and outside of the system to truly get to where we need to go. So please still vote, find a way, make a way, but also find your niche in the movement for change that we're trying to garner now. If you're not an activist, if you're not, if protesting and rallying isn't your thing, that's absolutely okay. If you're an artist, pick up that paintbrush. If you're a writer, get on your computer and start typing and start documenting. If you're a musician, we have our Nina Simones and our NWAs. We have our authors, our James Baldwins, and our thinkers. And I just want to stress the imperativeness that everyone has a role in this movement. Voting is not the end all be all, but we need that in culmination and in tandem with the other practices and the other means for change. So please, 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 everyone has a role to play and find your part and play your part.
And in the state of Maryland, I know that currently Larry Hogan, our governor, has us voting in person in November. You can request an absentee ballot. So if you do not feel safe voting, or your parents don't feel safe, or you're immunocompromised and you don't feel safe, you can request an absentee ballot and vote from home.
Okay, thank you guys for a great open discussion on the power of your vote, how far that vote can go, and most importantly, the Census 2020. So when we're talking about our votes and we're talking about candidates, but we're also talking about issues. And one of the main issues that have come to the forefront with coronavirus is obviously healthcare. What is America's healthcare infrastructure? Is it failing? Why are the supply chains breaking? is Medicare for all, is healthcare for all finally going to come? So I want to ask the healthcare panelists, what are your thoughts for healthcare for all?
It's a non-negotiable. We need Medicare for all. We need a universal healthcare system where everybody has the right to live. Healthcare is a human right. No one should have to go in debt so they can stay alive. It is such a simple thing. Why is it that every other industrialized nation has a single payer healthcare system, but for some reason, the richest country in the world can't afford it? And that goes down and breaks down to lobbying. But Medicare for all, healthcare for all, whatever name we want to give it, it is a necessity, because before the pandemic, there was almost 40 million Americans who didn't have health insurance. 40 million, and that was before the pandemic. And now with, I believe the last number was 27 million people have lost their jobs and may have potentially lost their health care. We're looking at an economic collapse and a collapse in the ability to take care of your family. We need a single payer system that's not connected to your job, where your boss can't deny you the right to birth control because of their religion, where you are in charge and you have the power to feel safe and to have the healthcare for your family.
I completely agree with everything that Zach just said. It's an excuse as to why somebody should be denied to save their life. Like, it shouldn't cost thousands of dollars or put anybody in debt to save their life. And I just believe that it should be a basic human right to have the right to have health care. Like, it shouldn't be anything stopping us from living our lives. Nobody should be determining that the amount of money that I make or the amount of money that I have puts a price on what my life is worth.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said, and I think that one of the main problems in our society is that we keep politicizing human rights. Like, health shouldn't be a discussion. Free education shouldn't be a discussion about, like, whether it's a Democrat or Republican or like different types of political parties type of thing. We should make it a standard for, like, a basic living for life, basic standard for life. That makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with everything that everybody said. I think a big thing, something that someone else brought up, is that in every other industrialized nation, it's just something that's there, something to be expected. It's important to remember whenever we're comparing nations that a lot of these other nations that have it now, they weren't always like that. In fact, in the cases like Germany, Japan, and just some of the other countries, whenever America would go into these countries and supposedly help them rebuild their countries, these are certain things that they were like, well, these are non-negotiable. But yet we come back to our country and it's something that is debatable. It's something that that you don't really need, because they say, well, we need money to support our economy. And a lot of that is used towards especially minority communities and just communities as a whole, to say, well, if you don't agree with this, then you're not democratic. If you don't agree with this, then you're a communist. Or if you don't agree with this, then you hate America. That isn't the case, because these are American principles whenever we say that people have the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, and what we know is, our healthcare system is racist, right? What we have now is not equitable. It is not based in equity. We know that minority communities are typically the communities that will lose their healthcare. Right now, the people on the front lines are minorities, and we need to stand for everyone in the community. And that means passing a universal healthcare system. That means everyone gets healthcare, regardless of your background, regardless of your race, that we just have a healthcare as a human right, because healthcare is healthcare for all. Medicare for all is solely based in the root of equity. That means everyone should have equal access.
I completely agree with everyone's point. Also adding to the point, I think we can all agree that in some aspects, our healthcare system is inadequate. There are some supply chain breaks. There are some places where we need to grow. And we're normally talking about the physical health, the broken bones, the virus, the sickness, but we also need to focus on, our mental health. So our mental health infrastructure is drastically worse than our physical health, because a lot of times we don't have any at all in some places. So how can we best improve our mental health infrastructures in schools and our communities? Or even should we? Is it worth the investment? So I want to hear you guys' thoughts and opinions on how we can improve our mental health infrastructure.
I think it is absolutely worth the effort. It's worth the time. It's worth the money. Whenever it comes to mental health, that's something that our communities typically we suffer the most from. You'll have people that won't get help because, you know, people say, well, you can walk, can't you? Or you're not failing. And even some cases when kids are failing in school, kids are moping around, the teachers don't have the time to address it, and we shouldn't expect them to. It doesn't make any sense that you can go to a country where everyone can seemingly buy all kinds of things that aren't necessarily needed. And whenever we want to actually get something done as far as our legislative body, then all of a sudden money comes up. But in other times, whenever we actually need money to keep people from dying, that money doesn't exist. There's no way for us to get it back because they say there's no benefit. There's no reciprocity in it. When people die, overall, no matter what the community is, no matter where you are, when your constituents are dying, when the people in your community are dying, mental health is one of the biggest things that takes away, especially young Black males. People go home, they don't know who to talk to. A lot of these people don't have support systems. So what else are they expected to do? Now, what they will teach you in health class is how you're supposed to help your friend deal with it, and how you're supposed to help your friend go get an adult or get somebody that's trusted. And even whenever you do that, and that is the case, a lot of times that person can't help them. They just bring them into their office. They say, well, are you happy? And the people don't really want to talk about it, but they don't have the time or resources to dwell on one student.
Oh, go ahead, Isaac.
Thank you. Yeah, so a lot of problems I see, especially with my friends, the school system puts the idea of mental security, mental stability, I guess. I don't know how to phrase it, but mental stability and actual educational system and that educational environment as two separate entities. And we treat we put more focus on the actual education side, but not equally having the same attention to the mental health side. And the students who are vulnerable, mentally vulnerable, tend to struggle in the educational side. And due to the lack of support with the mental health side, left and lower in the spectrum usually, and a lot of my friends have been victims of that. So,
to add on to everything that's been said, I don't think by any means on any level of governance that we place the amount of attention, money, and care into mental health as we should. It's nowhere near what it should be. And it's so crazy because politicians specifically, leaders in general, they have so much skin in the game for whatever their motivations and ambitions may be, whether it be money, whether it be maybe you want to bring down crime in your county or your jurisdiction or your whatever. You know, maybe you have interest in healthcare, right? Something. Our mental health is so inexplicably tied into everything that we do, and just the way we navigate the world in general, that it makes no sense to not funnel as much money you can into your healthcare system. One of the things that I think is the downfall of the America in general, right, is that we criminalize a lot of issues that should probably be treated as a mental health concern, and we focus more on criminalization and punishing people instead of tending to their mental health needs. One of the biggest examples of that is addiction, and drugs in general, opioids, marijuana, whatever. We throw these people and we consider them castaways because they aren't contributing to the productivity and the labor output that we see fit. Right? And that goes for mental health in general. You have depression, you have anxiety, well, you're not performing as you should be. And so, you know, we're going to just cast you aside. For our schools, there's nowhere as many psychiatrists and psychologists in our schools as there should be. We only have four wellness centers in the county, all of them at high schools. And these wellness centers are usually equipped with social workers and mental health counselors. But we only have 4 of them in our county, and we have 207 schools in our county. That's ridiculous. It's not enough, and it should be. One of the things I want to point out before I let someone else take over is that our county executive, Ms. Angela Alsabrooks, she proposed recently an allocation, I think, of $20 million to a mental health facility in this county. And that would essentially take away from some of the funding that we have for our police department. And again, that's $20 million that would be allocated towards a mental health facility in the county. My question is, why wasn't this done sooner? Why did it take a pandemic? Why did it take this issue to come up about police for our legislators and our leaders to decide to finally put some money behind the issue of mental health in our county?
Yeah, and jumping off of that, especially when we're talking about school systems, is why is it that we have SROs and, I forget the statistic, but there's millions of children who are in schools with cops but no counselors, right? And why is that the case? We need to be funding the root problems and putting, instead of just funding cops to fix some issue that cops shouldn't have to deal with, we need to be funding for mental health care. And again, I ran my student member of the board campaign, a huge portion on mental health. Again, I would like to preface that everything I've said is my own opinion and not of my Howard County School Board. But it's so important that we fund healthcare, we fund mental health care, and it just needs to be included. It's not we can't separate it as some separate issue. That it is a part of healthcare, and that's where it has to be.
And also, we have such a narrow idea of what we consider a mental health problem or mental health concern. I don't have to be outwardly debilitated, right? I don't have to be outwardly dysfunctional, or something doesn't have to be outwardly wrong with me for there to be a concern. And when we talk about our schools specifically, I think we need to do a much better job, or in general, of recognizing signs, and also just have a little bit more empathy when it comes to mental health concerns. It shouldn't have to take me lashing out and getting into a fight at school. It shouldn't have to be me cussing out a teacher or cussing out my parent. It shouldn't have to be me running away and putting myself in a really bad situation for someone to speak up and realize that there's something wrong with me. There are people who walk this earth every day who are functional with whatever their mental health concerns are, right? They're able to go to work, they're able to go to school, they're able to smile and just kind of tough it out and get through the pain. But again, a lot of that is because they have to, right? A lot of people can't afford, in whatever means you would like, to allow their mental health concerns to show, to allow their symptoms to show and their problems to be worn on the outside of their sleeve. A lot of people can't afford that. Again, because as we talked about earlier, we have this obsession with commodifying things in our society. If you show a sign of your mental health concern, you are considered unable to deliver the labor output that society needs from you, right? Whether it's your family, maybe you're not able to, maybe you don't feel like making dinner for your kids tonight. Maybe you just don't have it in you. Maybe you just don't have it in you to stay up until 12 o'clock in the morning working on a math assignment. Maybe you don't have it in you to go to work in the morning because you physically cannot get out of bed. And instead of helping these people, instead of lending an ear, we demonize these people. We tell you to tamp it down a bit and get up and tough it out anyways.
Yes. Wonderfully said. Wonderfully said, Nina. So next, I'm moving on to the next section, which is housing. So as Nina and other people had pointed out, we criminalize things that don't necessarily have to be criminalized, from addiction and houselessness, and all those things play into race. Everything in America is built on race. Unfortunately, that's just the truth. So I want to ask the panelists of housing, what are some examples of systematic racism in housing?
I'll go first. Just talking about what I was talking about with environment, all of it is the same. I think almost every single one of these issues buys into another part of the issue. Whenever we talk about systemic racism in housing, it's more likely that, especially in communities like this, that someone will go off and say they're just out of college. When you're just out of college, you're working a job pretty much to pay back all of that debt that you had before. We have these sort of unrealistic expectations, especially as I almost said segregation, but no, as people start to come in from other communities and force us out of our own, then that means that just to stay where we were before, it's costing us more and more and more and more money. If we're most likely to not be able to make ends meet as it is, and if we don't have enough money and there are huge wage differences already between ourselves and what is considered the majority, then obviously you're not going to be able to buy a house or even put down a down payment that's acceptable. You're left with these huge mortgages. Sometimes people are paying them off for the rest of their lives. A lot of times it's always a choice between, do I want to live and actually be the person that I know that I can be, or do I need to make ends meet? And the thing that always toughs out, especially in communities like this, where people are more likely to have children, people are more likely to have someone who is dependent on them. They even cross generationally. In this community and in other Black communities, people are more likely to have someone who cannot provide in their household. This unequal distribution of people actually having money and the unequal distribution of money in general within the workplace, these all buy into racism in housing, because that is what it is.
And I think also housing, the systematic racism with housing really stems back to segregation and redlining, which would force cohorts of African Americans into specific regions, and they wouldn't be allowed to buy houses in other regions due to like legal reasons and things like that. And those long-lasting impacts of redlining are still seen today with de facto segregation that's caused groups of African Americans to be concentrated in more impoverished areas. And then this in turn also transcends into the school resources that they're allowed to have, which then impacts their education, which impacts their chances of getting a job that'll allow them to move out of those impoverished areas. And so I think just the housing in general and all the systematic racism built around housing causes this, like I mentioned earlier, this inescapable cycle of poverty. And it's a problem that continues to persist. And it's one that a lot of African Americans and people of color cannot escape.
And as Nick, he mentioned redlining, it's not widely known, but that's very much a part of Maryland's legacy. Baltimore and their covenants were really the blueprint of housing segregation in the early 20th century. So that's a little bit of Maryland history. But the next question is, do you think that we should move to a more socialized housing model?
I guess I'll go. That's just a hard question to answer, because I think universally everybody's going to be in a different position. And just sort of buying in, or just talking about what I was talking about before with people already that own land, the actual Black individuals that do own land, I wouldn't ever say in general that you should move from one specific method of housing, because these are sometimes things that people have fought very long, hard battles to already hold on. The just holding land in general is more of a it's more of a challenge nowadays, and I just wouldn't make an assumption about everyone.
I concur. I think the idea of socialized housing is one that is not widely received by a lot of people in the positive light. And personally, I don't have a very solid opinion on.
So on that note, I'm very excited to hear a song by one of our panelists, Maya Pierce.
Okay, hi everyone. This song is basically dedicated to, everyone who's lost their lives for police brutality and just really expresses everything of the fight we're going through right now. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. The blood of my brother spilled on the streets. Here's the rose that grew out of the concrete. The same ground where his body lay. Like rose petals on a stony grave. Why do we fear each other from the lies of yesterday? I'll never know. But look at all these roses with petals on the ground. They call this one my crown. I'm asking you to look at all these roses with petals on the ground. They call this one Trayvon Martin. I'm asking you to look at all these roses and petals on the ground. They call this one Breonna Taylor. All these roses and petals on the ground. It's far too many for me. The tears of my mother were spilled at his grave. She knows the cost the whole world could not repay. And when she should have felt our sympathy, all we told her is that her baby was guilty. Do we even have compassion? Do we even want to see? I'll never know. But look at all these roses with petals on the ground. We call this one Freddie Gray. I'm asking you to look at all these roses with petals on the ground. We call this one Eric Garner. Asking you to look at all these roses with petals on the ground. We call this one Sandra Bland. Oh, say look at all these roses with petals on the ground. It's far too much for me. 8 minutes, 46 seconds of saying I can't breathe. He was the rose that grew out of the concrete. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let us march on till victory. Let us march on till victory. Let us march on till victory is won. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Phenomenal.
Thank you so much, Maya, for that beautiful selection, well, 2 selections. That moves us now to our final discussion topic, which is COVID-19. I know we couldn't have a youth panel without talking about COVID-19 today. So I'm so excited for our last group of panelists. And our first question is, are we doing enough to ensure the safety of our residents?
I believe that we could be doing a little bit more. I think the reopening phases that we've gone through are pretty premature, given the fact that overall number of cases, like new reported cases, hasn't gone down significantly enough for us to start reopening restaurants. I think National Harbor reopened a couple of weeks ago, which I thought was crazy. But we have mask mandates, which are good, but there's still a lot more we can be doing. And I feel like just the reopening has only been for like economic purposes and not so much for making sure that we've gotten through this public health crisis.
I agree. I think the reopening phases, we've gone through them a little bit too quickly. And I know that the numbers of deaths have gone down. And I know the number of ICU units being occupied have gone down. But I think people are still catching the virus. And I think by reopening so quickly, a lot of people have this perception that the virus isn't as important or isn't as present as it was back in March, and that's very much not the case. Many people are still getting it, and I feel like in general there's less media attention and just like less attention in general to the virus, and people started to ignore the fact that we're still in the middle of a global pandemic.
I agree wholeheartedly with what Nick and Janine said. I think everyone's so eager for different reasons. Everyone's so eager to kind of like forget and try to like ignore the fact that we're still in the middle of a pandemic and that it's gonna be a slow and steady race to ensure that we come out of this safely. Janine said economic reasons, and I think that's undeniably one of the biggest motivations as far as our governments go. And I guess for regular people, for civilians, us, we're just kind of eager to get back to our way of living, right? Whether that's going back to school, whether that's some sort of normalcy with our work schedule, because undoubtedly COVID-19 has kind of came in like a wrecking ball and definitely shook things up. So I think what we're gonna see with COVID-19 is unfortunately, we're gonna continue to press forward regardless of what the pandemic says. And I think just looking at how we usually kind of react to things, COVID-19 is not gonna go away. We're just gonna kind of stop seeing it, right? We're gonna just kind of let it fade to the background, kind of try to ignore it and try to get back to regular life, whatever that may be for us.
I don't think we were ever doing enough in regards to COVID-19. It's clear to see our government knew about it months before they said anything about it. I know there's a wave of people who brought up after the whole discovery of COVID-19 that they were sick during that November to January time period. I was one of those people that were sick, and I went to the hospital and they didn't know what was wrong with me. And I feel as though as Americans now, we have this normalcy of like accepting the bare minimum from our government, from our officials, and we praise them for things that aren't worth praising if we really think about it. When we look at other countries and what they're doing and how serious they think this matter, it's like, what is America really doing? Especially opening up so early. It was for economic purposes. It wasn't because things are okay and it was safe to go outside. And I feel as though we saw how people don't take things serious unless it hits home. Especially Americans, you know, they don't, unless it happens to their family member, their friends, they're not taking it serious. And the government saw that when they tried to start closing things down and people were still going outside. So for them to continue to try to open it up, and also this new conversation of basically the government's trying to like suppress information that we're getting now. Like they're trying to stop telling us certain facts and results of COVID-19. And it's to show that, I mean, I agree with what Nina said, that it's something that's going to fade, and they're going to stop talking about it more and more within the next few weeks, next few months. So no, I don't think we're doing enough, or we ever were doing enough.
So to end our panel discussions, I have one last overarching question, still within COVID-19. And I want all the panelists to keep your answers to just 1 minute. Okay, so with many of the essential workers being minorities and some of their compromises stem from inequity in health, housing, economics, and having food deserts, what can be done to assist them now?
I think one thing that can definitely be done to assist them is more money coming from the government to directly help their households. I know that a lot of people who received those checks from the government felt like it wasn't enough, that singular time payment, and they need that additional money, especially our healthcare workers who technically still have a job, but you know, that job's not covering for a lot of the stuff that's happening to them right now. And also just making sure that they have those supplies that keep them healthy and safe during this time.
I personally think,
go ahead.
in the same vein as Nick, that the one-time check of $1,200, that's what most people got, wasn't enough, especially for the duration of this pandemic and how long people have been out of work. And I think that the best way to assist people, at least now, is to put in place a framework so that way people don't experience this type of insecurity in the future. Because scientists have been tracking, there's a whole area of science dedicated to tracking down diseases and pandemics, and they know something like this could happen again in the future. So we need to make changes within our systems. That means moving away from capitalism, moving away from a more consumerist type society, to make sure that in these type of situations, everybody's okay and we don't have people disproportionately struggling, getting hurt, and dying because of what we have in place just because we don't feel like working on it and addressing it.
I think another solution could be some type of relief program. I know so many people have lost their jobs due to COVID, and it's going to take a long time for people to become employed and to get enough money to, you know, start going back to living a regular life. So I definitely think relief in terms of whether it's housing, student loans, rent, anything in that nature. So even if you can't, I guess, give out money again to the nation, but relieving them of some of that pressure, some of that obligation, because when you think about it, some of the things that cause crime to go up and is that money and that you know, lack of money, lack of resources, lack of being able to provide. So definitely having relief in some areas, I think that'll be one of the things you can do along with providing resources.
I agree with everything that was said. I think a relief program of some sort is a brilliant idea. And I also agree that the government needs to be putting out more money to these people. We're not going to recover from COVID-19 quickly. Our economy is going to be at odds for a little while after this. So we owe it to these essential workers to support them in any way we can, but primarily economically. People are getting kicked out of their homes, losing apartments, can't pay their mortgages, can't pay their bills. Even with, you know, rent relief and other means of assistance, people are losing jobs. So yeah, supporting them economically.
All right, thank you to all the panelists. This is where I'm going to wrap up the panel discussion, and I want to do a little recap of everything that we talked about today. We've gone over so many topics. So we went over education, police reform, economics, environment, the power of our vote, and the census. Don't forget the census, guys. Voting 2020, health, housing, and COVID-19, with 2 amazing performances and a beautiful introduction from Councilwoman Walker. So I also have some action items that I wanted to take away, that this is what gets put into legislation. This is what gets put into the streets. And the action items are defunding the police, but refunding the community. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this whole entire discussion. I love the way that was worded. I'm going to steal it and give credit. I love that so much. And the next one is Medicare for all, healthcare, universal healthcare, different names for it. But I think that's something that should be on a lot of people's agenda. You guys should really do the research and see if that's something that you want to support or not support. And there are candidates who are supporting that in the fall. May not be presidential elections, some are a little iffy on that, but in local and congressional races, there are plenty of people who support that, and if that aligns with your values, definitely support them. And last but definitely not least is the Green New Deal. Green energy, public transportation, caring about our planet is at the utmost importance. We only have one planet. We're not inhabiting Mars soon, no matter what SpaceX says. We need to take care of what we have, and we can do that, but it's at odds with a lot of economic and business interests, but we have to let them see that losing just a few dollars, and a lot of times you don't even lose money, but losing a few dollars could mean having a generation that has clean water, having a generation that has a planet to live on. So with that being said, I wanted to wrap it up, send it back to Councilwoman, my apologies, Walker.
I'll take that.
To end it.
Maybe a little foreshadowing. Yeah. Who knows? But I want to thank you so much. This has been absolutely phenomenal. Orissa, you've been fantastic in moderating your questions. The way you kept them focused and the areas in which you touched were are so significant. I just want to say before I go forward that I really would like all of you all on my advisory committee, because there's no question points that you brought up are points and issues that we need to move forward into legislation. And I want you all to help craft that, because I know that you're capable of doing that. I want to thank you, Chelsea, for your wonderful spoken word, Black in America. That touched me. I had my tissues right here. And then thank you, Maya, because with that beautiful medley, then I had to actually turn off my camera so I could wipe my eyes. But the reason why you all are so powerful is because you're passionate and you believe in what you're saying. You believe in us, you believe in this nation, and you believe in yourselves. And that's going to push us forward. We recognize we're in a paradigm shift. A paradigm is a new way of doing something. We're shifting. The old way we'll never go back to, no matter what they try to do with these various phases. We'll never go back to the way things were. And it's going to be up to you all to determine what this new paradigm is going to be once we finally settle into it. I do want to say that focusing on environmental issues is critical. It's critical. Focusing on taxes or how people are being taxed, typically in areas where there's a lot of people of color, they pay more taxes than others. We have a bill right now, CB 48, 2020, in the Prince George's County Council. If you don't know about it, look it up, because this is what everybody's talking about. And this is proposing to raise property taxes, to reduce the homestead cap, the homestead tax, so that what would have been a savings for you will become an expenditure for you. I think it's a bit of history that I want to touch on also. Prince George's County, as it became Blacker, it became more affluent, wealthy, and more educated. And not everybody liked that. The other direction, for some reason, is much more acceptable. So many of the things that are happening today, I do believe are intentional, probably coming from those who don't really like the facts of how Prince George's County has come around. But regardless, this is a county that's diverse and it's for everybody. So we want to make sure that when we move forward in an inclusive way. I do want to mention the difference too. Affluence being what you can spend, wealth is what you can pass down. Now, the way we're losing out in wealth, we saw in 2008 with the global, it wasn't a pandemic, but it was a recession, the Great Recession. And what that did was, if you bought your house for $100,000, just for the sake of a number, in 2002, and it was valued at $300,000 in 2006, then your wealth went up $200,000 because that's what equity grew in your home. Now, 2008, everything started to downturn, housing, et cetera. So maybe you lost value. Some people who may have refinanced for that 200,000, but now their house is worth 150. They bought it at 100. They were underwater. That's what we call being underwater. These are things that take away wealth from you. Now, during that same period, people were victimized by robo foreclosures from banks that illegally took people's homes away from them. Never gave them back, but took the homes away from them. I mention this because there are a lot of nuances in things that are happening that you need to be paying attention, and it seems like you already are. But I want you to be aware because it's going to be you. You all are it. You are our now. You are our leaders now, without question. I'm just so excited that I got to hear you all speak, and I'm grateful, and I would be honored to have you all participate with me to move legislation forward. I want to say as thank you to each and every one of you, Isaac, Ayana, Nick, Aurora, Kendall, Olivia, Christian, Anaya, Zach, Marissa, Chelsea, Maya, Drake, Janine, Nina, and Taylor. You are powerful. Don't ever lose that. Recognize that your power is yours. Your intellect is yours. Don't let anybody take it away. You're gonna make the generations to follow phenomenal. I also wanna say a special thank you to my fantastic team. And I got a pretty large team. I've got Gina Anderson Ford, got Marie Gibbs. I've got Chris Valentine, Carla Cash, Keyshawn Washington, and our newest, Hugo Cantu, who will be coming on with us. And I'm very blessed to have them. I do want to say that Gina and I had an opportunity to meet with Black Girls for Black Lives, and we were blown away. We are so impressed with all of you. Marissa, having known you for years, since 2017, I believe, when we started with our Marching Forward. Marching Forward, which came out of the March for Our Lives. That took place here in Washington, D.C. I've been so impressed with just watching you grow. And all of you all are dynamic. Nina, I cannot wait to see you in action, sweetheart, because you are something. And I've got to mention my daughter, Janine Walker. I didn't say she was my daughter, but I'm so excited to raise independent thinkers. While we might not be on the same page with everything, I love that she is passionate about what she believes and she backs it up with facts. So, hey, you will change people. You will change people. So I want to wrap up there, but I definitely want to make sure that our audience recognizes that this was a partnership with Black Girls for Black Lives and Prince George's County Office of Community Relations. And thank you all for making this possible. This is fantastic. To our audience, let's do our part in helping to make a better world for ourselves, where there's equity. Black lives do matter. Black lives matter. We must vote. We must complete the census. We must be present, and we must have our voices heard. Thank you all for coming this evening. Thank you.